we start out in the most comfortable way. We get to know each other first at the Mina house. We see the pyramids in the background. We meet our local guides, and we begin experiencing the unity of the group that's with us. And we experience in this space it's a transition to get us ready to move into the experience of traveling in the Nile. So we're warmed into it, and also things begin to happen. And as they begin to happen, you're in the same suite that I stayed in, the Jimmy Carter suite.
Right, yeah.
Which is, I'm not sure which suite you stayed in, but it's such a beautiful space. You open up the windows and there's the pyramids right there. That's literally the back view. Our kitchen, where we ate these amazing meals, has this. Why do we start out this way? Because we're in unity consciousness. Everything's provided for you. All you have to do is keep showing up, keep showing up, keep showing up. And in this space, we open up to the miraculous. In this energy, the Course in Miracles, there's only love or fear. And you're embodied in the ultimate love that you can have in Egypt in this space.
Absolutely. Yeah, so we start out at this very famous hotel, the Mina House. It's where the armistice in the First World War was signed. It's hosted politicians and Jimmy Carter and movie stars and Sarah Larsen. And then from there, we're going to fly to the south of the country, and we are going to start in Aswan. And this is where we get onto our boat. And you remember I talked about the fact that we were going to be sailing for a week on this private luxury ship, the Afandina. And one of the things that it affords us is the ability to do pretty much whatever we want. There are very large cruise ships that sail the Nile, and they're on a fixed schedule. You know, it's very rigid. You're there with a lot of tourists. It's only our group. And here's an example. We just pulled up on the shore of the Nile one day. And when you're sailing the Nile, when you were talking about, when you smell bodies of water and you smell the vegetation, how it transports you back to the Nile, there is something that is so unique about this river. It's almost impossible to explicate it and to explain that uniqueness. It's so deeply experiential, But to be in such an intimate relationship to the Nile and to the way that people live, as you're sailing along and you look out into the fields and you realize these people are living literally the way that they did 1,000, 2,000 years ago. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I mean, you can see the countryside, the landscape is, phenomenal. And there's this deep kind of psychic resonance. This is us, so one of the lovely things is that all of the food is locally grown, macrobiotic, prepared just for us. So everything we're eating was in a farmer's field the day before, and purchased that morning. So it's very much a family environment and a family atmosphere. And so here's an example. We just pulled up on the shore and said, hey, let's have a picnic. We've done things where we've gone into villages and just inexplicably found ourselves in the middle of a wedding ceremony, and suddenly, wow, we're the guests of honor.
Yeah.
I have played soccer with kids on an island, and we were the first outsiders, the first Westerners, the first people not from their village that these children had ever met and encountered. So those are the kinds of things that the kind of freedom that we're afforded by this particular mode of travel.
We want you to know this because if your name's on here, you're going to be, at least your energy is going to be hanging out with us. And so just know this is what you're probably going to be doing with us.
Exactly. So then we go to the Temple of Isis at Philae. And I'm assuming that everyone is familiar with Isis. Yes, goddess of magic. She's one of the primary netters in the Egyptian pantheon. She was both the sister of and wife of Osiris. And this temple is really one of the most elegant places I have ever seen. It's on an island. It was moved because after they built the high dam, it would be flooded. And UNESCO back in the 1960s moved it literally stone by stone and recreated it and realigned it perfectly on a nearby island. And of course, you know, the energy nexuses in these places are huge, you know, because it's geological scale. So I don't think that the impact of this place has been lessened any, you know, by the fact that it's now, you know, right next door to where it originally was. So what we do is we go privately at dawn. And this is such an important visit because we are returning to sort of the 0 point of our experience when we go. So, you know, we're going into the womb, we're going into the Holy of Holies. And one of the things that we encourage everybody is in this ceremony, bring everything that you want to release from your life, the husk that no longer serves you, and bring the seeds that you're going to plant that are going to grow and bear fruit in your life, in your community, in the world. And then we come out to greet the rising sun, and
there's incredible art on the wall that your body recognizes. There are herbs written out and drawn out. The hieroglyphics have ancient symbols that trigger just this amazing experience. The way that the sun catches, there's holes in the ceiling parts that you become available to become light with. And as we're doing this, I just want you to experience it as if you're already there right now. Experience this with us. This energy there is no separation when your imagination in the 5th dimension can go into this third eye, this balcony of seeing. So as we're talking about this, as we're sharing, just experience it right now. The husk. What are you ready to shed? What are you ready to let go?
of course, that's the essence of magic, to go from the unmanifest into the manifest. That's the still point, the 0 point of creation, and that's why Isis is the goddess of magic and such a deeply maternal, you know, figure. And so then from there, we go to a temple called Kamambo. And this temple is unique because it has a dual axis, and it is dedicated to 2 gods. It's dedicated to Horus, the hawk god, and to Sobek, the crocodile god. And it also very much embodies light and dark. And so now we've gone from the root chakra, from unity, into creation. And along with that, as I was saying, comes, you know, the perception of duality, of conflict, of sexuality, of polarity, of all of those aspects of the manifest world. Right, Joyce, gotta be careful not to step on those. And so really, this temple is such a profound embodiment of the interplay between dark and light. So this is the god Sobek, the crocodile god, and so if you think about it, I mean, what is the crocodile? He's, you know, the dweller in the muck. He's that dark, primal, you know, chthonic force, that destructive force, that chaotic thing. And then we have Horus, the god of the air, the creature of the air, a creature of light. And the fact that this temple is dedicated to both of these gods simultaneously is really fascinating, and it's also an indicator of how the ancient Egyptians looked at the issue of good and evil in the world. They didn't break the world up the way that we do. They didn't perceive of darkness and chaos and death and destruction and these things as being evil. They were a necessary aspect of creation. And part of what we have to do is we have to achieve mastery of those forces within ourselves. That's like, you know, the gig. So, and then the next temple up is and one of the really fascinating things about this temple of Kamambo is that it was a healing temple in the ancient world. I thought actually I had some pictures of it in this, but I guess maybe it was a different slideshow. It's amazing because there are bas-relief carvings and hieroglyphs on the walls of this temple of a surgeon's tray that use the exact, I've traveled with doctors and with surgeons, well, Sarah's a doctor. And so people that are medically trained, they look and they go, oh yeah, that's how we're taught to lay our surgical tools out. And they're exactly the same, forceps and scalpels and, sponges. And this is, 1,500 years BC when this temple was created. And so there's a very powerful element of healing, not only in the iconography and the visuals and the concept of it, but on a more profound energetic level. Because the ancients, when they built these places, they were built in full consciousness of the energy from the earth, and they were built to be in harmony and alignment and to act as resonators and amplifiers for that flow of energy between the earth and the cosmos. With, of course, our psyches and our personal energy being the pivot point, the accelerant as we, move through these spaces. And so then we come to the temple of Horus at Edfu, and this corresponds to the solar plexus. So Horus was the god. Normally at this point I would tell people, I would share with you about the passion of Isis and Osiris, and I'd kind of walk you through that myth and that mythic structure. But in the interest of time, suffice it to say that Horus and the god Set, so Sobek was a crocodile. Set, we don't know what Set was. He's this weird, crazy, sort of semi-jackal-like creature. But Set was the ultimate god of darkness, of chaos, of selfishness, of all of those things. And Horus and Set battled for decades, and eventually Horus mastered Set. And so that's why this corresponds again to the solar plexus and our ability to master those lower forces within ourselves. And one of the things that's interesting about this place is that it's sort of like, Capistrano, San Juan Capistrano, because every year at this temple, hundreds and hundreds of hawks come and lay their eggs up in the upper reaches of the temple, and then the young hawks are born. So there's something happening in the natural world that the ancients were keyed into. It's not that they just went, hey, let's put it here. What do you think? We will also be visiting the West Bank and the Valley of the Kings, and we'll be going to the Temple of Hatshepsut, and this is it's also called Deir el-Bahri, and it is truly such an elegant construction and such an elegant setting. And this is part of a sacred landscape. There is a ceremonial way and a set of solar and celestial alignments between this structure and the structures on the opposite bank of the Nile, Luxor, in ancient Thebes, so the Temple of Luxor and the Temple of Karnak. And this is an ancient landscape that this is miles, it's 20 or 30 miles across a river. And yet in the modern world, as we've begun to excavate these things and figure this stuff out, we realize, oh my God, these temples have a perfect alignment across, that kind of an expanse. And so, it's a testament not only to their artistic skill, but to the fact that they were willing to exert such tremendous effort to create these vast ceremonial landscapes on a scale that we can't even really, imagine. And then we move to up into the heart center, and this is the Temple of Luxor. And you can see a little bit. Let's go back here. If you imagine a giant Lego man laying on his back, and so this is the outer pylon here, and when you see it in the right way, it's like these are giant feet, quite literally. And so this outer area, this outer courtyard, is the only place where the common people would be allowed to go. Again, the feet. And as you move through the temple, as Sarah said, we're doing things that 2,000 years ago would have resulted in death. Like the most select initiates of the society, people who spent decades of their lives purifying themselves spiritually and perfecting their understanding of the psycho-spiritual, religious structures that they were a part of, were the only ones allowed into, these inner structures.
You couldn't draw what was on the inside. You couldn't carry pieces of things on the inside out. You weren't allowed to, and today we have pictures And this is, to me, evidence of the oneness and the elevation of humanity that's happening, the oneness that we're able to see it. At one point, we were so distant, we didn't even realize that so much of us was exactly the same. And today, without a doubt, we know, wow, we're 99.99% just like the person right next to us.
This is a huge courtyard in Luxor Temple, and you can see these columns. It represents the rib cage. And so all of the sites, Karnak, Luxor, the Temple of Hathor, Dendera, these correspond to the heart center. And in just the same way, that we actually have multiple heart chakras in the Vedic system. And the Greeks had multiple words. We have one word, love. The Greeks had eros and agape, and they had different ways of characterizing different qualities of love. Is it love for humanity, love for the self, etc.? And each of these temples corresponds to a different vibration of the whole complexity that we, in English have one word for, love. So this is a really fascinating thing. You can see, this is a mosque. This mosque was built in the 11th century. And when that mosque was built, the ground level, this is the door. I use your pointer. That's the door to the mosque right there. And that's about 12 feet, maybe a little bit more in the air. So that's where the ground level was when that mosque was built. Subsequently, we've come in and we've excavated, not we, but someone came in and excavated and restored the temple to its original foundation level. And now that mosque hangs in the air. It's an amazing, amazing thing to see. You can actually go into the mosque from the other side. And the walls of the mosque are built so that the pillars of the temple are what supports the roof. And it's staggering to be in a mosque and to see that the primary supports in the walls are carved with the images of ancient gods and hieroglyphs. And so this temple is such a place of synthesis, because there is also a Christian chapel that was built here. There was an area, for a while they thought that it was a fresco of the Last Supper. What they eventually discovered was that it was a Roman era fresco, and it's beautiful. It's such a gorgeous thing, and it's also quite high up in the air. But that it was from when the Romans worshipped the emperor as a god. And so it's Roman senators bowing down to the god, the Roman emperor god. And so, over centuries and centuries, people continue to use this place as a place of worship and a place of connection with the divine, long after the ancient Egyptians were gone. Very nearby, this is the Temple of Karnak, which is, I love the Egyptians, and especially the guys that work in these places. So we call these the Galabea boys, because this is, that's the man dress is a Galabea, and they're all over the temple. But what I have found is that these guys, because they're steeped in the energy of these places and the kind of spiritual miasma of these sites, they're so sensitive to people like ourselves. And they treat us with such respect, despite the fact that in Islam, it's easy, and not just Islam, I mean, many modern day religions, if they don't really understand what people like us are about, they think, oh, you're a pagan and you're worshiping these idols. It's easy to, create this gross simplification. And of course, for Christianity and Islam, these are big no-nos, these are big sins. But these guys, you never get even the biggest whiff of that from them. They love that we're so respectful about these places, and they do everything they can to facilitate our exploration and our experience. I've known this dude for years.
We called them the guardians.
Yeah.
We called them the guardians.
And the thing that's even more perhaps fascinating about a work like this is that this was done by a team of probably 30 individuals. And yet, there's such a harmonious result that comes out of that. So that's another thing, is they had a very different conception of the self than perhaps we do, much less ego-based. And And then, whoops, back up. There we go. And then one of the things that we do that is so incredibly powerful is we go into the Sekhmet Chapel. Some of you may have heard of this. It's become a little bit legendary. It's tricky to get into. You got to know the right people. You got to grease the right palms. Which is, it's okay, I don't have a problem with this. I would prefer actually that it be under lock and key and not just, anybody can waltz in, because, so this is a carving of the goddess Sekhmet. It's about 10 feet tall, carved from a single block of black diorite, which is one of the hardest stones on the planet. And it is the only piece of statuary that I'm aware of, and I've been through most of Egypt many times, the only piece of statuary that is whole and unbroken, that is in its original place on the ground where the ancient priests put it, with the structure around it still completely intact. And so when the ancients would carve works like this, they carved them in a way that was completely conscious. And these were activated. They were enlivened. There's a spirit inside of this stone. And so this stone is a nexus between the cosmic template of Sekhmet and that same place inside of us, inside our psychic awareness, inside of our spiritual bodies. And so when you stand in this little chapel in front of this statue, it is an experience like no other. And it has such resonance. And Sekhmet in particular, Sekhmet, she's characterized sometimes very simplistically as a goddess of war. But in truth, Sekhmet is like a fever that goes through the body to heal a sickness. Or when a farmer will burn a field in order to facilitate, the planting of new crop. She's that sort of destruction that results in new growth and transformation. And so this is also a place where the husks of our old lives, when we stand in that presence, so she's a spiritual blowtorch that just burns away the dross, So there's very deep, profound spiritual alchemy that happens in here. And there have been times when I've walked in here when the energy coming off of her was so strong, it was like walking into a rushing river, where literally I would have to turn my back and sort of work my way along the wall until I could, get enough strength to be able to stand, in front of her. It's incredible. And then we move on to the Temple of Hathor at Dendra. Who's familiar with the Hathors or Tom Kenyon? So Hathor is the goddess of love, joy, music, dance. She is married to Horus. That's what her name means, Hathor, the house of Horus. And it's fascinating to me, the Egyptians have this genius for combining meaning in multiple layers. Her face is also a schematic of the hieroglyph for the heart. So they would draw the heart like a little picture with a couple of little, handles on the side. And this temple is so gorgeous. First of all, it's just beautiful, and they've done a remarkable job of restoring a lot of it. And so these colors, when we see these ancient temples, we think, oh, it's stone or whatever. No, it was a riot of color, and they painted these. The paint was created from ground precious stones. So it was lapis lazuli, it was turquoise, it was coral. And so you can imagine what this must have been like when it was in its most vibrant stage of life. It would have been completely freaking dazzling, So French archaeologists have been working here for a number of years, and they've done a significant level of restoration. And so it's really beautiful. But there's also some very profound information that's embodied in this temple, including a lot of precessional information that speaks to what Sarah was talking about. So this is where we start to encounter some real mysteries, and we begin to see some clues that are hiding in plain sight, that reveal to us that what we have been taught, what the orthodoxy holds about the age of mankind, the age of civilization, a lot of these things are off the mark.